Hello and welcome to the Bellingham Festival of Music's 2025 Summer Festival. My name is Dakota Farris. I have the privilege of being one of the two conducting fellows invited to participate in the festival this summer. And as part of our duties, we're so excited to be able to share a series of pre-concert lectures for each of the concerts on the season with you. We have a little bit of a theme going throughout the summer. We're going to be visiting different musical locations on each of the concerts. So later in the summer, we're going to visit Scotland, London, Vienna. But for opening night, Sunday, June 29th, we are presenting a program called The Russian Masters, featuring works by Dmitri Shostakovich, Rachmaninoff, and Tchaikovsky. The first work on the program is Dmitri Shostakovich's Festive Overture. This is one of his most popular works. It was written in 1954, commissioned by the Bolshoi Theater. They were wanting to commemorate the 37th anniversary of the October Revolution, and they needed a very festive opening work for their concert. However, they only had 3 days until the concert was going to happen. So with 3 days to spare, they approached Shostakovich about writing a work. He set to work immediately. It's even said that as he was working, writing out the full score, he had each completed page sent off as it was completed to the Bolshoi so that their music copyists could start preparing the parts for the concert upcoming. Well, he did finish the work, and it was an immediate success. It's been enduringly popular ever since. Since Shostakovich only had a very short time to write the piece, he had to recycle some of his some material from his older works. So for instance, the overture opens with this bold brass fanfare, and this melody is actually taken from a work by Shostakovich called The Children's Notebook. There's a movement from it called Birthday, so he took the melody and used it as the opening fanfare for this overture. You'll hear that it also comes back very triumphantly and loud at the end of the work. Now, between these two utterances of the fanfare melody, there's an extended allegro, very lively, fast section featuring solos for the clarinets, all the strings, even the snare drum gets its own solo. It's very exciting music, very fun. This work has been enduringly popular ever since it was premiered. It was even used as the main theme for the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. After the overture, we welcome pianist Simon Trpčeski to the stage to perform Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. This is Rachmaninoff's final work for piano and orchestra. Over his lifetime, he had written 4 very celebrated piano concertos, and this is his final attempt at writing a work in that same genre. It was written in 1934, while Rachmaninoff was staying at his summer home in Lucerne, Switzerland. Rachmaninoff performed it himself later that year in Baltimore under Leopold Stokowski, and it was an immediate success, and it's been enduringly popular ever since, entering the standard repertoire immediately. The piece is not a concerto in the standard sense. He called it a rhapsody. What it really is, it's a series of 24 variations based on the theme from Niccolò Paganini's 24th and final caprice for solo violin. Now, there were many other composers who were also inspired by this famous work by Paganini. Rachmaninoff's is probably the most popular. This very virtuosic work for piano and orchestra. As I said, it's not a concerto in the strictest sense because it's all in one movement. 24 variations played one after the other without a real break, although it can be divided down into 3 larger sections of roughly equal length. Interestingly, the work starts not with the theme, but with a short introduction and then the first variation before we hear the main theme. Rachmaninoff probably got this idea from Beethoven, who did something similar in the finale of his 3rd symphony, the Eroica Symphony, where we hear sort of the bare bones of the theme before we actually hear the melody itself. Going on further in the piece, in Variation 7, Rachmaninoff introduces the famous Dies Irae chant melody. Dun, 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 dun. This has been used by many composers over the centuries. Rachmaninoff used it in several of his other works, notably in his symphonic dances. Later on in the piece, getting to Variation 18, this is probably the most famous variation. It's played often as a concert piece in its own right, used in countless films, TV shows, instantly recognizable. It's based on the inversion of the melody. So Paganini's original melody, yum ba da ya da da dum, da 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 da. What Rachmaninoff does is he inverts it, so he turns it upside down. Ya da 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 yum, ya da da da. See how it's just the same thing flipped upside down, creating this absolutely beautiful adagio, the 18th variation. Now, that will probably lull you to sleep, but then we're immediately awakened because there's more variations to come. As we get to the 24th and final variation, the piano part is becoming extremely virtuosic at this point. There's even an anecdote, hard to know if it's true or not, but it's said that Rachmaninoff himself, since he premiered the work, he suffered from performance anxiety, and he wasn't sure if he could really pull it off in the premiere. It's said that he broke his normal rule about not drinking alcohol before the performance. He was encouraged to take a single shot of creme de menthe so that he could feel very confident about playing this final variation in the finale. So it's sometimes called the creme de menthe variation. The work ends really brilliantly, and it's one of the greatest works in the piano repertoire. We're so excited to welcome Simon Trpčeski to perform this with the Bellingham Festival Orchestra. After the intermission, we'll be presenting Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 5 in E minor. This work was written in 1888. It was premiered later that year in St. Petersburg with Tchaikovsky himself conducting. It was written about 10 years after his celebrated Fourth Symphony, which we played last season, and 5 years before his final symphony, the Symphony No. 6, in the same year that Tchaikovsky himself passed away. This Symphony No. 5 is what's called a cyclical symphony. Now, what I mean by that is that there's a main theme which reoccurs in each of the 4 movements, sort of tying the whole work together. The first movement starts off with this main theme, sometimes called the Fate motive, played by the 2 clarinets in unison over very hushed, muted strings, presented as if it's a sort of funeral march. The dum, da da dum, ba 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 dum, and goes on like that. After this slow introduction, the sort of funeral march, we launch into a very lively, very contrasting first movement allegro in 6/8 time, featuring a lot of dance-like rhythms. A dun da dum bum 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 bum. It's very exciting music. Ends very quietly in E minor. Then we go into the second movement, the famous second movement, which begins with the slow string chords, slowly establishing what key we're in, eventually ending up in D major, and then a glorious solo horn presents one of Tchaikovsky's most famous melodies. At 2 points throughout this gorgeous slow second movement, we hear the main theme reappear as if interrupting this sort of lyrical flow of the music to remind you that fate is always knocking at the door. The third movement, curiously, is a waltz. Now, we would often expect the third movement of a symphony to be a fast, sort of skipping, sort of scherzo sort of movement. But here it's a very relaxed waltz, featuring prominently these rhythms called hemiolas. A hemiola is where we have a 2 against 3. The waltz is normally in a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But here Tchaikovsky often goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3. See? The 2 against 3 feel. It plays throughout the whole movement and gives a somewhat unsettling feeling to what is otherwise a very beautiful waltz. At the very end of the third movement, we do get the main theme again, as I said. Sort of leaves you wondering what's going to happen next. Well, what happens next is the sort of monumental fourth and final movement, where we hear the main theme now transformed triumphantly into E major. This leads into a very long allegro section, back in E minor, with lots of competing different themes. One of them has been called Cossack music, the dum bum 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 ba da 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 da, this sort of swashbuckling melody, contrasts with other more lyrical themes, sort of always fighting with each other. Now, this builds up into quite a frenzy, and it leads to this tremendous cadence, the half cadence, in which many people might think the symphony is over, right? It's this triumphant thing, and then there's a grand pause, but hold your applause. It's not over yet, because we finally reach the coda of the symphony, where we hear the main theme again, played brilliantly by the brass and strings. Dun, da da dum, ba 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 dum. This huge climactic ending to the symphony. Interestingly, when it was first performed, many critics, including Tchaikovsky himself, said that the ending of this symphony was actually a failure, that it was sort of clumsy, it went on too long or something. Now, I'll let you decide for yourselves, but certainly, since that time, this has been one of Tchaikovsky's most enduringly popular works, undoubtedly one of his greatest symphonies and a wonderful way to close our first concert of the season here at the Bellingham Festival of Music. Please enjoy.